It's the Trump tide. Leon Yates writes, the A-team, A on the helmet. And finally, Linda Stone says, Nick, if I put this helmet on, it's going to mess up my hair. Well, that's all the time we have tonight. I like the last one. Shannon Bream and the Fox News at Night team will take things from here. Miss Shannon.
Listen, your Roll Tide, they broke my Seminoles' heart.
Oh,
but congrats,
that's right.
Congrats to you guys on winning it all. And a good day at the White House.
Shannon.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, take care.
All right, I'm Shannon Bream in Washington, and we begin with a Fox News alert. It is unclear what the president and the Pentagon plan to do about Syria. A powerful fleet is expected to deploy shortly, but tonight we are watching the skies over the Middle East as European Air Traffic Control Agency warns airlines from around the world of possible missile strikes into Syria. Now, we don't know how they came across the specificity of this warning, but check it out. Eurocontrol alerting tonight. Due to the possible launch of airstrikes into Syria with air-to-ground and/or cruise missiles within the next 72 hours, and the possibility of intermittent disruption of radio navigation equipment, due consideration needs to be taken when planning flight operations in the Eastern Mediterranean Nicosia Flight Information Region. Also tonight, Ed Henry keeping an eye on the White House over claims the president has reached his limits with special counsel Robert Mueller and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. But first, let's go to our Kristen Fisher as the world waits and watches for the White House response to the chemical attack in Syria. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, good evening, Shannon. Well, both President Trump and his Secretary of Defense have canceled big plans to be away this weekend. And then on top of that, what you were just talking about, Shannon, Eurocontrol, which is essentially the air traffic controller for all of Europe, it just issued that alert warning airlines of possible airstrikes into Syria sometime over the next 72 hours. So when you add it all up, it's looking very likely that if the U.S. and its allies retaliate, that it'll likely be near the end of this week.
The last time President Trump responded to the Syrian president's use of chemical weapons, it led to 59 Tomahawk missiles being launched from 2 Navy destroyers. Now, almost exactly a year later, even more warships armed with even more missiles are headed to the region. Tomorrow, the USS Truman will be setting sail from Norfolk and headed to the Mediterranean. It's part of a pre-scheduled deployment, but it could be within striking range of Syria in about a week. And joining the Truman are 7 warships capable of firing hundreds of Tomahawk cruise missiles. So there is significant firepower headed to the region. At the same time, a coalition is building to determine what to do with it.
We're working with our partners and allies and our national security team to look at all options.
Those allies include French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Theresa May.
This attack that took place in Douma is a barbaric attack. Obviously, we are working urgently with our allies and partners to assess what has happened on the ground. We believe that those responsible should be held to account.
The U.S. and its allies are still working to confirm that chemical weapons were in fact used. But today the press secretary said that the White House has confidence in its declaration that it was indeed a chemical attack. As for how exactly President Trump will respond, all she would say is that all options continue to be on the table.
I'm not going to get ahead of anything the president may or may not do in response to what's taking place in Syria.
And tonight, some very harsh words from the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, after Russia vetoed a U.S. draft resolution which would have established an independent investigation into the use of chemical weapons in Syria. She accused Russia of, quote, protecting a monster and trashing the credibility of the council. Shannon.
Kristen Fisher, thank you very much. Is a strike imminent tonight, and what would the longer-term implications be? Let's bring in retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North and the host of War Stories, and New York Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Gentlemen, great to have both of you with us tonight.
Great to be with you.
So as we know, the president is in conversations domestically here and also with our potential allies. Let's talk about the fact that in the region there are a lot of folks who think that we need Arab partners in this. Luke Coffey, who's the director of the Allison Center for Foreign Policy at Heritage, says this: I think it would be worth the diplomatic legwork that it would require. It would send a very strong message if Arab countries participated. Congressman, what are the odds?
It's essential. It's so important for us to be able to see some of these countries that are actually quite wealthy, whether it's Saudi Arabia or UAE or the Qataris, Jordan has been involved in a way with what's been going on in Syria to a certain extent. Israel has been involved, but as far as some of these other Arab countries that exist in the region, I think it's imperative. They're all concerned about Iranian aggression. Well, this is the moment to push back. If you don't push back right now, it's only going to get worse.
Colonel, if you were overseeing or suggesting potential options to the administration, military in nature, what would you suggest?
Well, first of all, you have to get enough assets in the region, and we're not there yet. I remember 32 years ago tonight, I was sitting in a planning cell picking targets in a place called Libya, because on the 5th of April, Muammar Gaddafi had detonated a bomb, and one of his agents had detonated a bomb at a discotheque in West Germany. And it took 10 days to get the assets in place, to make all the arrangements. If you're going to use more than just a handful of aircraft, you're going to have to have places to recover them. You're going to have places refuel and rearm. You have to have search and rescue assets in place. And so I think there were a lot of people thinking maybe it was going to happen tonight, and I couldn't imagine it.
It takes time to get everything in place. How important is Turkey in this as well?
Well, Turkey is very important because Turkey has closed Incirlik Air Base, which is a NATO air base. Erdogan is not a friend. And Erdogan doesn't particularly care for the Assad regime, but on the other hand, obviously he doesn't care much for us because he's not been helping us much at all. At the end of the day, you're going to have Incirlik as a recovery base because you're not going to be able to land aircraft except in extremis in places like Jordan and Israel. Israel could be very helpful in terms of search and rescue, and it takes time to place those assets in position so that they'd be there to recover downed air crews.
And back over on Capitol Hill, there's been some discussion. We talked about last night, Senator Mike Lee over on the Senate side saying if there's going to be a robust military response, that the president needs to come to Congress for that. In the meantime, you also have Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal today talking about what kind of assets we need to have, what kind of reaction we need to have, and who needs to be held responsible. Here's what he says.
There has to be robust reaction in action, not just words or rhetoric. The response has to have a military component against Bashar al-Assad, but it also has to send a message to his enablers.
Okay, so a military response to Assad, but also it has to send a message to his enablers. The president's called out Putin by name. He's called out Iran as well. So where do we go with that?
Well, so we have all these different countries, different approaches with each. Now, within Syria, where you could be targeting command and control, which could be infrastructure, it could be personnel. It may not just be Syrian, it may also be Iranian. There might be ways to deliver the chemical weapon. Maybe it's part of their air force, or it's part of their infrastructure of how they are able to carry out the chemical attack. But with Iran, we have a whole other debate going on, the future of the Iran nuclear deal, the effort to ramp up sanctions, which is that's what brought the Iranians to the table in the first place when you saw the negotiation and deal take place during President Obama's term. Same thing with Russia, where we're talking about sanctions and what leverage we have. There's a debate at the UN Security Council. So that will continue, and Ambassador Haley countering the narrative that the Russians and others are trying to put out. So all of that needs to take place as well. I expect what we saw a year ago to take place again. I do expect there to be a strike, but I don't think it's just going to be that. And last time where it was just us, now we're seeing Britain and the French. So I think there's going to be more of a coalition. I think it's going to be us utilizing multiple leverages of the DIME principle, diplomacy, information, military, economics. And I look forward to it being quite effective.
And quickly, Colonel, any guess on a timeline?
I'd say it's probably a little bit more than 72 hours. I really don't know, but I know where certain assets are, and they're moving in the right direction. But again, it took Ronald Reagan 10 days. I mean, he made the decision on the 7th of April. The actual attack went on tax day. I'd look around for tax day or later.
Okay. Gentlemen, great to see both of you tonight.
Great to see
Thank you. All right, congressional leaders are warning the president against firing special counsel Robert Mueller or Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry following the very latest for us from the White House tonight. Ed?
Shannon, good to see you. A lot of news breaking tonight in the special counsel investigations. President Trump plotted his next move. He was dining at the White House tonight with his personal attorney, Jay Sekulow, we're told, as well as Harvard Law professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz. Dershowitz says they were talking Mideast policy, but remember, Dershowitz has also called Robert Mueller a political zealot and is charged that the Justice Department has already violated Michael Cohen's constitutional rights by raiding his homes and office. Dershowitz's perspective meshing with the anger the president expressed last night in those long remarks about this. The president saying it was disgusting that Cohen had faced those raids. The president started today with two succinct tweets that said much the same, far fewer words. Attorney-client privilege is dead, he tweeted, and then added a total witch hunt. Tonight, CNN reporting the president is considering whether to fire Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who has given Mueller wide latitude in his probe. And when Mueller apparently came to Rosenstein with potential illegal activity by Cohen, the Deputy Attorney General authorized the FBI and the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York to move forward with those raids. Now, firing Rosenstein could hem in the Mueller probe without ending it. But the New York Times is reporting tonight the president sought to fire Mueller in December after it was erroneously reported that the special counsel was looking for records from Deutsche Bank to dig into the Trump Organization. After those stories were corrected, the president calmed down, according to the Times, but this is at least the second time that the president allegedly pushed to fire Mueller. Today, there was a shift from Sarah Sanders, too, who at the White House podium has previously said several times the president has neither the intention to fire Mueller nor was even thinking about it. For the first time, she would not issue a denial today, as Dershowitz lashed out at the Cohen raids.
This is a very dangerous day today for lawyer-client relations. If this were the shoe on the other foot, if this were Hillary Clinton being investigated and they went into her lawyer's office, the ACLU would be on every television station in America jumping up and down.
Sarah Sanders asserted the president does have the power to fire Mueller, while a spokesman for Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer insisted Justice Department regulations show the president cannot remove Mueller because of Attorney General Jeff Sessions' recusal. It is instead Rod Rosenstein who has the power, which is why he appears to be the man on the hot seat tonight, Shannon.
All right. Ed Henry, thank you very much. Just one day after Ambassador John Bolton took over as the new National Security Advisor, Tom Bossert, the Homeland Security Advisor, announced his resignation. Bossert garnered bipartisan praise for his role in the administration's response to Hurricane Harvey, which ravaged Houston. He is the latest departure, joining a growing list of high-profile resignations and firings this year.
For the president's top advisors to be turning over and churning in this way indicates a profound confusion, even chaos in policymaking. And it must be mystifying and deeply troubling to our allies.
I thought Tom did a great job, but everybody deserves their team.
Well, a White House source tells Fox News the Bossert's resignation was the result of Bolton's cleaning house at the National Security Council. Source also says that Bolton may merge the National Security Council and the Homeland Security Council, which now function separately but do share staff. All right, we're going to check in with Chris Stirewalt on the Mueller probe. Plus, Facebook grilled on Capitol Hill. Founder Mark Zuckerberg sitting through hours of questioning about privacy issues. And with it, he faced some unusual questions today.
Do social media companies hire consulting firms to help them figure out how to get more dopamine feedback loops so that people don't want to leave the platform?
No, Senator.
Well, after complaints about the DOJ slow-rolling Congress, will the House Judiciary Committee finally get the unmasking documents and answers it wants? A U.S. attorney is overseeing the FISA warrant document release.
It's very clear that my direction is to ensure that we get the documents produced as quickly as we can. We do so completely under the laws, and we do so with integrity and professionalism.
And the verdicts are in on Justice Neil Gorsuch's first year on the Supreme Court, how his vote could now impact the landmark decisions we are awaiting from the High Court tonight.
And enter EGO.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg spent hours on Capitol Hill today, taking questions from senators about Facebook's role in the 2016 election, but also on illegal immigration and possibly brainwashing your kids. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel staying up late with us tonight to tell us what it's all about. Good evening, Mike.
Shannon, good evening to you. There were many questions about privacy, and Mark Zuckerberg was quick to apologize for Facebook's blunders. Zuckerberg testified for about 5 hours before a joint Senate hearing in front of the Judiciary and Commerce panels before it wrapped earlier this evening. A Hawaii Democrat late in the day pressed Zuckerberg on if Facebook would cooperate with federal authorities on immigration-related issues.
You were asked to provide or cooperate with ICE so that they could determine whether somebody's going to commit a crime, for example, or become fruitful members of our society. Would you cooperate?
We would not proactively do that. When law enforcement reaches out to us with a valid legal subpoena or request for data, in those cases, if their request is overly broad or we believe it's not a legal request, then we're going to push back aggressively.
This was a big scene here on Capitol Hill. Tons of media with the CEO of a social media concept with billions of subscribers testifying in front of Congress for the very first time. An Alaska Republican praised Zuckerberg for the Facebook success story, starting all of it in his dorm room.
Only in America. Would you agree with that?
Senator, mostly in America.
You couldn't do this in China, right? Or what you did 10 years.
Well, Senator, there are some very strong Chinese internet companies.
Right, but you're supposed to answer yes to this question.
Partisan concern late in the day about children, about the privacy rights of children, and about whether young people are getting basically brainwashed by Facebook.
Do social media companies hire consulting firms to help them figure out how to get more dopamine feedback loops so that people don't want to leave the platform?
No, Senator. That's not how we talk about this or how we set up our product teams.
Do we need a law to protect those children? That's my question to you. Do you believe we need a law to do so? Yes or no?
Senator, I'm not sure if we need a law, but I think that this is certainly a thing that deserves a lot of discussion.
I couldn't disagree with you more.
A number of unusual questions today, but not a lot of fireworks. But Zuckerberg is not in the clear just yet. He is due back on the House side of the Capitol for what promises tomorrow to be another marathon hearing. Shannon?
I bet he cannot wait. We know you'll be there as well.
Thank you, Shannon.
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Thank you. All right, back now to one of our top stories. The FBI raids on the president's personal attorney. Do they have anything to do with Russian collusion? And why the left keeps saying the president's about to fire the special counsel despite the White House's repeated comments to the contrary. Fox News Politics editor and editor of the Halftime Report, Chris Stirewalt, joins us now. Are you smirking already?
Well, it may be the left is saying that because the president said he might. It's possible that the president in a public setting in front of cameras said that he might.
Well, I thought it was interesting when he was asked last night, and he was really on a roll when he was meeting with his, getting ready to go into the Syria meeting with his generals, when he was asked, why don't you fire Mueller? He didn't say he was going to. He didn't say he wasn't going to. But
he entertained.
That showed restraint, I thought. I did.
Well, all right. Well,
he could have said it's coming. Right now, I'm making a phone call.
Well, he could have, but I think he knows what Newt Gingrich and other people have told him and have said publicly, which is it's the death knell. Mm-hmm. You do that, you make the move. Now, remember, he can't fire Mueller.
He thinks he can. The White House said today they believe that he is within that authority.
Well, I think that I can still fit into a 48-long jacket, but that's not going to happen. The president can fire the deputy attorney general if the deputy attorney general does not meet the president's commandment to fire Mueller.
Talking about Rod Rosenstein.
Right. He can order Rosenstein to fire Mueller, and if Rosenstein quits rather than do it, then the president would have to go through the ranks of people at the Justice Department to find someone who would do it. And I think Gingrich is very much on the money with this in terms of the political consequences. You just shatter the Republican Party. You take a party that right now, if we were to lay aside the massive, almost insane level of fixation on this stuff, because remember, we have no idea what Michael Cohen did or was said to have done or anything.
And this may be completely about Stormy Daniels and that whole situation. This may have nothing to do with Russia.
Or completely about something even more unrelated. We have no idea, and everybody's shadowboxing here, pretending like they know. Nobody knows. So we have this giant kerfuffle, the mega kerfuffle of all time, taking place around this. If we look over on the other side of the ledger for the Republicans, the president's approval numbers have edged back up in recent weeks. The Republicans are doing better. Their map is expanding for the Senate. They have a chance to actually make it through this midterm. It's going to be tough to keep the House, but they could expand their majority in the Senate conceivably. They've got all of this over here. If the president starts firing people at the Justice Department to shield himself from a criminal probe, that all the good for Republicans right now goes away.
And there are numbers to prove this. Okay, we've got the Quinnipiac poll when people were asked whether or not the president should fire Mueller. The majority of American voters, 69% versus 13%, say, no way, he should not be doing this. And when you break it down by Republicans, that's a huge spread there, too. 55% say no, we should not be thinking about firing Mueller. 22% say yes, and then you've got another 23 don't know. But that gets to your point about whether even Republicans think, let's not stir up the wasp nest.
There are two groups of people that I have identified that seem to want the president to try to fire, to get Mueller fired. And those are a lot of journalists who would love to cover this. And then I would also include in the same Democrats who think it would harm him. And then there's this other set of people who believe that the president is in mortal peril, that somehow everything is about to come crashing down for him, and Mueller's going to do all of that. If they like the president so much, why do they think he's so guilty? Why do they think that he is facing so much exposure on this? I can't imagine what would be. So firing Mueller is option A, bad. That's the big bad. But then there's another one after that, which is refusing to cooperate, digging in his heels, fighting his way through this. Every American should want Mueller to expeditiously and quickly finish this work and move on. We have more important things to do as a country than play out these dramas every night.
Including the president, which people close to him try to tell him. He's always maintained his innocence. If you are, let's just let this play out. You get cleared and we move on. So we shall see. Again, the White House saying he's not getting fired, although you're skeptical. All right, with that.
Well, it's only Tuesday.
Thank you, Chris Stirewalt.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, the president's top economic advisor says the Congressional Budget Office has it wrong when it comes to estimates about future federal deficits.
Our view, as you know, is lower tax rates, particularly business, create incentives to invest and work. I think we're going to pick up productivity and wages. So that gives you an entirely different baseline.
Congressional Budget Office says the combined effect of the tax cut bill and the latest spending plan will push the deficit to $804 billion this year and predicts a $1 trillion deficit by 2020. Larry Kudlow says not so. Meanwhile, Kudlow also says that China may have actually, quote, blinked 3 times in offering trade concessions. China's president promised to cut auto tariffs in a move seen as an effort to diffuse escalating trade tensions. President Trump predicting on Twitter today that the two countries will, quote, make great progress together. Well, governors of 3 border states sending National Guard troops to the southern border. But what about California? Governor Jerry Brown has been uncharacteristically quiet. So if he refuses, could President Trump force troops to the California border?
But if he nationalizes folks from the California National Guard, they would be in a Title X status. And he could do that without the consent of the governor.
And our Democratic candidates defying their own party on the I word when it comes to President Trump. We'll get the midterm update when we return.
Investigation Discovery.
Cracked windshield. That's why we show you exactly when we'll be there, saving you time so you can keep saving the world.
Members of the National Guard in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas have already begun arriving at our southern border per the president's request. But in California, where Democratic Governor Jerry Brown controls the National Guard, nothing is happening yet. Trace Gallagher is tracking it. He's got the details. Hey, Trace.
Hi, Shannon. This scenario has played out before in California when then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger was asked by President Bush in 2006 and again by President Obama in 2010 to send the California Guard to the border. Governor Schwarzenegger took 2 weeks to decide before agreeing. But in this case, Governor Jerry Brown is battling with the Trump administration over California's sanctuary laws and for his recent pardon of 5 criminal illegal immigrants facing deportation. As for whether Brown plans to send the Guard to the border, his office will only say he's considering it, though he has had a number of conversations with Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. The governors of Arizona, Texas, and Mexico have already said a combined 1,600 Guard members will be deployed to the southern border, with Arizona Governor Doug Ducey saying this is not a, quote, partisan issue or an identity issue. It's about the lawlessness along the border. Experts say if Governor Brown says no, he is well within his legal authority, but the president could choose to nationalize the California Guard, though he could only use them in a limited capacity. Ohio GOP Congressman Steve Stivers says he doesn't think it'll come to that. Watch.
With almost 500,000 folks in the National Guard across the country. The easier thing to do is to work with states who are willing to serve and send their soldiers to the border. So that's probably the most likely course of action.
President Trump says he wants to use troops at the border until progress is made on the border wall. And Defense Secretary James Mattis has approved paying for 4,000 National Guard personnel from the Pentagon budget through September. Remember, the Guard is not there to apprehend illegal immigrants, but rather to support the Border Patrol in things like aviation, surveillance, and logistics. Customs and Border Protection says the number of border apprehensions this March was up more than 200% from last March. Shannon.
Trace Gallagher, live for us on the West Coast. Thank you very much. Time now for your Real News Roundup. Democratic Party elders like former President Obama's chief strategist David Axelrod have a strong warning amid the party's surge to the left ahead of the midterms. Do not commit to impeachment. But Democratic Senate candidates like Congressman Beto O'Rourke, raising lots of money in his challenge to Republican incumbent Ted Cruz, don't appear to be listening. He was just asked on a Lubbock radio station if he supports impeaching President Trump. Here's his answer.
The answer is yes. I don't think that President Trump has the fitness or competence or judgment to be in that position.
So, if O'Rourke wins a Senate seat, and over on the House side, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi becomes Speaker again, she knows she's going to have an ally for conviction if the House impeaches the president. Meanwhile, Pelosi, Democrat from California, is getting 2 Pinocchios from the Washington Post fact-checker tonight. The Post finding fault with her claim last week that 86 million middle-class families will see a tax hike under GOP-led tax reform. That claim is misleading, says the Post, because 80% of taxpayers are expected to get a tax cut, just 5% a tax hike. That is according to the nonpartisan and left-leaning Tax Policy Center. Well, the Harvard Crimson reporting tonight, the university's School of Public Health plans to interview faculty anonymously flagged for microaggressions. The faculty is being targeted thanks to a student questionnaire which asks if they have experienced any verbal or nonverbal slights or insults that targeted a particular identity group. The form lists age, disability status, gender, immigration status, linguistic background, nationality, political views, race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic classes as examples of identity groups. Well, it is the latest move in what has been seen as a highly contentious process. A federal prosecutor from Chicago now in charge of turning over subpoenaed Justice Department documents to congressional committees, waiting and waiting as they investigate alleged bias against President Trump. Will the GOP finally get answers? We'll break it down with our panel. And President Trump's executive order aimed at putting more folks to work and getting them off the welfare rolls. Why some are mad. That story is coming up.
Get new floors during Empire 1966. 1-800-885-1966.
The Justice Department directing U.S. Attorney John Lausch, a Trump appointee, to get scores of documents related to the Hillary Clinton email investigation and potential FISA abuses turned over to Congress stat months after they were requested. The move amid complaints from the GOP and the president that the DOJ has been slow-walking the document request. Tonight, Lausch talking about his new assignment.
Based on my experience, both as a prosecutor and then in private practice beforehand, I mean, document reviews, they can just take time. And one of the reasons that they take some time is, kind of reviewing all of the materials to look for relevance, but then to figure out what materials need to be redacted out of there. And so the additional folks that have been added is going to be helpful.
All right, let's bring in tonight's panel. Fox News contributor and radio host Richard Fowler, host of the brand new Fox News radio show Benson and Harf, Fox News contributor Guy Benson, and syndicated radio host Chris Plant. Great to have you all with us.
Hey.
And the fact is that all of you are radio hosts now. You can talk for a long time.
I think everyone
I'm not
is.
sure that we're going to be able to keep you succinct enough for these panels.
Eventually, everyone will have a show.
For 15 minutes, right? All right, Chris, let's start with you. What do you make of this? Because, I mean, there was a lot of backlash, including from Trey Gowdy, who was like, listen, we asked for this stuff months ago. ago. Now you're just appointing this guy. What's been happening in the months since we asked?
It's a classic bureaucratic response. The failure of government leads to more government. The failure of bureaucracy leads to more bureaucracy. Because they're not getting the job done, we've added another layer of government to make sure the job gets done. We had to bring in a guy from the Midwest who's going to bring a little common sense to this dance here in Washington, D.C., and try to get him to, turn over unredacted documents to the Congress. This has become absurd, of course, and I feel sorry for the guy. Now he's going to be crushed in the midst of the tectonic plates that are shifting around in Washington, D.C. And if he's successful, I don't think he'll get a lot of credit for it, and if he's not, he'll be the GOAT.
Well, and, Guy, a lot of people come to Washington and find out it is a tough place to survive and to navigate, and he's got a tough job.
He does, but it's better late than never, in my view. It's the job of Congress to oversee the executive branch and executive agencies in many cases, and the fact that they are trying to get documents and are unable to do so month after month is deeply frustrating. So this guy's a Trump appointee. He's got a good reputation for the private sector and the public sector. He's coming in and saying, this is my entire job, to streamline the process and get these requests fulfilled. I would prefer to have that than the status quo going on with nothing getting accomplished. So, again, may not be an ideal solution, but I think it's better than what was previously the case.
It's kind of embarrassing.
Well, but Richard, one of the complaints that Congress has is that, listen, these things are leaking out. I mean, we can't even get a look at them, but they're leaking out in the media and other places. Like, why can't you speed this up? If you're willing to leak it to the media, why can't we see it? We're members of Congress.
Well, I think that's part of the problem. I think we've had a leak-a-palooza for the past 2 years, almost 2 years of the Trump administration. So I think that's problem number one. And problem number two is that I think while Congress waits for these documents, we still haven't seen any resolution to the fact that we have a problem with FISA courts, generally speaking. We've had a problem since their creation. Democrats have complained and moaned about how FISA courts are an implosion of our due process in this country. Finally, some Republicans have joined us to say that, yes, FISA courts are indeed a problem because there is no representation for the people that are actually getting these warrants. And now, hopefully, Congress, when they get these documents, can say, maybe we'll pass some laws to fix this unbalanced court. And which is the larger problem that we have around FISA courts, which is how we got here in the first place.
Meanwhile, a way that a lot of people in D.C. get documents, if you're lucky enough and persistent enough, is through the Freedom of Information Act. And we're hearing something from the American Center for Law and Justice about this. They had months ago, maybe more than a year ago, asked about wanting to know about unmasking requests within the Obama administration on the Trump administration. And they said they found a number of things from the UN ambassador, Samantha Power, that she had, they say there are reports 260 unmasking requests, and they add this is part of it as well, in part of what they had to say about the materials that they've gotten. They say the same top-level Obama administration official reported to have made some 260 unmasking requests seeking surveillance information about the incoming president, and his campaign team was simultaneously engaged in communications in which she consoled others over the election results, blatantly insulted the president-elect, colluded with the mainstream media, and actively sought out ways to undermine the new administration before it had even begun. And Guy said there are plenty of documents so redacted they can't even get answers to a lot of their FOIA requests.
There are a few things that are very odd about this story. These multiple hundreds, apparently, of requests came between November and January. That's a very short period of time in between the two administrations during this transition process, apparently to undermine, in some cases, the incoming administration. I think that if Nikki Haley, who's the UN ambassador under Trump, were doing something similar about an incoming Democratic administration, there would be some very hot questions asked from the left. It's also strange that Ms. Power's position was that of UN ambassador seeking these unmaskings. That seems like a weird official to be doing this sort of thing. So, look, bottom line right now is the IG, the Inspector General from the DOJ, is looking into this. There's also a federal prosecutor looking into this based in Utah as well. We do need to get to the bottom of some of these questions and find out, were these unmaskings unusual? It seems like they are. Were they inappropriate and abuses? We don't know that yet. But there are enough strange smells about this that merit further scrutiny.
I want to get reaction from both of you. So, Richard, you first, and then Chris.
So I agree with Guy a little bit in that, there is this, this whole ideal coming from the UN is weird, but every White House operates differently. So we're not really sure what role Samantha Powers played in the Obama White House. Was she more than a UN ambassador? Was she involved in a special project? And we're also not sure if the unmasking was the same person. Until we know who was unmasked, and remember, all unmasking means is that there was an intelligence report, there was an American that was in this intelligence report, and Samantha Powers asked this person for his or her name to be revealed to her so she knew who it was. It could have been the same person. We know for a fact that there was individuals who have now pled guilty for lying to the FBI who was engaging in bad behavior in this transition period. Or talk about Mike Flynn, former national security advisor.
They got in trouble for quote unquote bad behavior. It's for lying about something.
Right, but we also uncovered that he was working with to export somebody to the Turkish government.
Samantha Powers,
no, but we don't know. But we really don't know what the underlying evidence is, and we don't know what
FISA. Well, you're
but we
right.
don't know.
So
we don't know what the underlying
special prosecutor.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that we're making a lot of assumptions about this evidence.
Okay, let's get Chris.
But the assumption that you're making is that she's unmasking Michael Flynn.
But you're operating under the assumption that she's engaging in bad behavior, and that we don't know.
Clearly, because it's extremely anomalous.
But we don't know if it's the same person 264 times.
Let's find out, shall we?
Time for that.
And also, the communications that she was bouncing back and forth make it clear that she was extremely upset about the incoming administration. We have no evidence she was asking for unmaskings before the election. Suddenly, when the election happens before Inauguration Day, there's this flurry of activity, and it's very anomalous.
Well, again, the folks who got their hands on this, ACLJ, say there's so much redacted that they plan to go to court to fight more, so maybe we will get more information, and then we can all debate it again. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, celebrating an anniversary. Scoring Justice Neil Gorsuch's first year on the Supreme Court bench. Critics and supporters weigh in on how he's lived up to expectations. We'll examine the evidence when we return.
More and more people are finding themselves in a Chevrolet for the first time. Trying something new can be exciting, empowering, downright exhilarating. See for yourself.
Model of Nugenix. Samples are not available in stores, so text 42424 and enter BASH.
President's nomination of Justice Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court reaches a milestone. Today marks his first year on the bench. In roughly 60 votes thus far, Gorsuch has been closely aligned with Justice Clarence Thomas, voting with him in 14 of 17 non-unanimous rulings. 3 big decisions await: gerrymandering, the Trump travel ban, religious liberty case, Masterpiece Cake Shop versus the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, many others, union dues and all kinds of things. So how do his critics and supporters view the justice's first year? Let's ask Chief Counsel, a policy director for the Judicial Crisis Network, Carrie Severino, and Elizabeth Wydra, president of the Constitutional Accountability Center. Great to have you both in tonight.
Great to be here.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of what we've gotten here. Nan Aaron with the Alliance for Justice, obviously leans to the left, said this today. Unfortunately, Justice Gorsuch has fulfilled most of our expectations by taking up residence on the extreme right wing of the Supreme Court, where he's questioned the principle of one man, one vote, showed willingness to hold President Trump's discriminatory travel ban, and ruled against the rights of LGBTQ Americans and civil rights plaintiffs. Scary.
A lot of those decisions were not terribly shocking. I mean, for example, with the travel ban, this is something, at least in terms of the stay, that was unanimously agreed to across the court. Really, what we've seen is, in the most of the cases, as we do throughout most cases, a large number of them are, in fact, unanimous. I think he's been amazing on the court because he's gone back to some of the same themes we saw during his confirmation hearings of, let's be very faithful to the text of the law. Let's stick with what the Constitution says here and make sure we're going back to that. And he's called the court back to that in several cases, in his opinions and in oral arguments. So I think it's been great, because what you saw during the confirmation hearings, and which everyone was pretty impressed with, is really what you got. He's very faithful to his oath.
Well, and that's what Leonard Leo, who was instrumental in suggesting and getting him on the White House radar, clearly. He's executive VP of the Federalist Society, said this. He's been a very worthy successor, referring to Justice Scalia, whom he replaced. He says, I think Justice Neil Gorsuch has proven to be everything that the president anticipated. And Elizabeth, depending on whether you're on the left or the right, that's a good or a bad thing. I mean, he is pretty much what people expected.
Well, I think that remains to be seen, actually. He talked in his confirmation hearing a lot about judicial minimalism, respecting state legislatures and the decisions of Congress when it comes to the role of the judge, not being a politician in a robe. And here we have him potentially striking down about half of the state's ways that they interact with their public sector employees in the Janus union case. Yeah. Absolutely. In the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, there are a number of states that have decided that they don't want to allow businesses to discriminate against gay and lesbian couples. And so, we'll see whether he's going to be the judicial minimalist that he claimed to be. I think also what I'm really looking forward to in the big cases that have yet to come down is how he rules on the actual merits of the Trump travel ban.
Right.
Many
Travel
of
ban
us
3.0
exactly
heading to the court within weeks.
The last day of argument, and you know he claimed that he would be an independent check on the president, even though the president is the one who put him on the bench. But we'll see whether he's going to rubber stamp Trump's discriminatory travel ban or actually, in my opinion, follow the Constitution and the law where it leads, which is to say that it's unlawful.
Well, Carrie, the court has a lot, we all know, over the last few years, put a check on executive power in a number of cases. Where do you think they go on the travel ban, and where do you think Justice Gorsuch falls in that vote?
Well, I think when you look at the actual merits of the order as it stands now, this one is even stronger position than the previous iterations of the travel ban. And the national security issue is an area where the president and the executive has its strongest ebb of power. So I really think it's not just Justice Gorsuch. I think you're going to see an overwhelming, if not unanimous, opinion that this ban, like President Trump or not, the president simply has very strong authority in the national security realm. And what they've done here has been a ever more in-depth view of these countries specifically. This is not a broad ban on just one religion, for example.
Well, Elizabeth, I want to ask you quickly about this union case we mentioned. This has to do with public sector employees. In this case, it's teachers, and whether or not they can be forced to pay union dues and union fees when they disagree with the politics of what the union is doing. It can have a huge impact. He did not say one word during this case, and he's been a very active questioner. What did that say to you that he was not tipping his hand at all?
Well, that was very interesting. And, you know, in that case, Constitutional Accountability Center represents Republican state legislators who are saying, as a matter of federalism, you should allow these states to have arrangements with public sector unions that requires a small fair share fee to cover the amount of collective bargaining that goes to safer workplace conditions, better pay and hours, et cetera. And that's really a fair arrangement. And as a matter of federalism, the Supreme Court, when there's no good reason in the First Amendment, should let it stand. So we'll see whether he's a federalist, a judicial minimalist, all of that when the big cases come down.
I see a little twinkle in the eye over there of Carrie thinking that you can be multiple things and come
you
to
can, and when there's no good reason, the First Amendment maybe, but compelled speech and forcing people to subsidize speech that they disagree with. And when you're talking about a public employee union, everything from their payment to their retirement plans, all of that is the same thing people are running on. You know, so these are all
safe workplaces shouldn't
issues.
be a political issue. That should be safety. But.
We should all agree on safety.
Yes.
We'll leave it there on that.
Safety's great.
It's going to be a very busy next few weeks over there at the court. Great to see you both. Thanks for coming in.
Great to be with you.
More news right after this. Our hero tonight. Well, a woman shot at YouTube headquarters last week stumbled into a nearby Carl's Jr.'s restaurant. A worker there named Michael Finney helped save her with a tourniquet made out of a bungee cord. Well, a Google employee heard about this. He said all he wants to do is move up in the world and have a chance to go to college. They started a $10,000 GoFundMe page to help send him to college. It's hit $24,000 in part, and thanks to a $10,000 donation from Carl's Jr. CEO Jason Marker. Good job, Finney. Thanks so much for your heroism. We'll see you tomorrow night.
History will record that on this day, Russia chose protecting a monster over the lives of the Syrian people.
So we have made a lot of mistakes in running the company.
Your user agreement sucks. Why should we trust Facebook?
We're proud to once again call the University of Alabama our national champions. Roll Tide.
Good morning to you. Live shot of New York City this morning, where it is 4 o'clock in the morning here on the East Coast. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Wednesday morning, halfway through the week. I'm Heather Childers. Well, we begin with a Fox News alert for you. Another busy day is shaping up, and another major show of force. President Trump deploying the USS Harry S. Truman strike group to the Middle East and Europe as tensions with Syria heat up. David Lee Miller is live for us in the Middle East with more on the move and how our allies are responding to the horrific chemical attack. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Heather. The region is now bracing for a U.S. military response to the reported use of chemical weapons by the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. The USS Donald Cook left Cyprus on Monday and is now within striking distance of Syrian targets. Published reports say it has an arsenal of 50 Tomahawk missiles. As you mentioned, also on a scheduled deployment to the region, the USS Harry Truman. And due to the heightened tension here, European air traffic controllers have been put on alert regarding possible military action against Syria. Airlines have been told to prepare for possible disruption of navigation equipment. In addition to the U.S., the UK and France are calling on the international community to respond to Syria's alleged use of chemical weapons. Efforts to resolve the crisis diplomatically ended in a deadlock at the United Nations, with Russia failing to win passage of its own resolution and vetoing a U.S. resolution that called for an independent investigation into what happened last weekend when dozens died in an apparent chlorine gas attack in the rebel-held town of Douma. U.S. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley accused Russia of siding with the Assad regime at the expense of victims of the chemical attack.
This resolution is the bare minimum that the Council can do to respond to the attack. The key point is our resolution guarantees that any investigations will truly be independent. Russia's resolution gives Russia itself the chance to choose the investigators. There is nothing independent about that.
And a high-ranking Russian general is now cautioning that Russian forces are on the ground in Syria and that, if threatened, retaliatory measures will be taken. As for the White House, the Trump administration says, Heather, that as of now, nothing is off the table.
All right, David Lee Miller live for us. We're definitely keeping an eye on that this morning. Thank you. Well, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, other stories are following.